Welcome to the American Garage. This is Steve at the American Garage. Let's take a minute and talk about how to use a joiner. Before we get started, let's talk about the purpose of a joiner. A joiner takes a crooked piece of wood and it makes it straight. You know, if you work with wood for any amount of time, that wood will twist, it'll get crooks and bows in it and all sorts of things that make the wood unusable. So a joiner is going to help us take minor bows, crooks, and bends out of a board so that we can actually use it. Now this piece of wood looks pretty gnarly. It's an old piece of 2x4. This is going to be our example today. I'm going to show you how to use a joiner to make this wood straight. Now what's the reason behind making the wood straight? Now if we don't have straight wood to put into our table saw, the table saw will bind and maybe even kick back the wood. Now let me show you why it is so important that we have straight edges on our wood. I'm using this curved piece of wood to exaggerate what I'm talking about so that you can see it clearly. Now if we have a piece of wood and it's not flat on this side going against the fence, then what's going to happen as we go through the blade is that wood is going to turn and it's going to bind against the blade. And this is going to make the blade want to kick back the wood. It's going to smoke while it's being cut. You're going to hear the blade bogging down, and it's not going to give you a good cut. Plus, the edge that it's going to cut along here is not going to be straight either. Here's the piece of wood that we're going to be using on our little project here. Now, if I lay this piece of wood on the tabletop, which is perfectly flat, and I rock it, I can see that it rocks back and forth this way. Okay, so we're going to take that out. And also if I set it on the edge, it rocks a little bit on this side. It rocks a lot on this side. So you can see it's not going to take a rocket scientist to figure out that this piece of wood is going to give us trouble in the table saw. However, if we use our joiner, we can straighten up a piece of wood just like this. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Now the joiner has three surfaces that we want to be aware of. It has the infeed bed, the outfeed bed, and the fence. Now these three surfaces can be controlled at whatever angle and height that we want them to in order to control the bite of our blade. Now if we raise the outfeed bed and lower the infeed bed, it's going to take a bigger bite out of the piece of wood. Normally we want to take very small bites out of a piece of wood so that we don't bog the blade down and we get a nice smooth cut. The deeper we go, the more chances are for kickbacks and splinters and other undesirables. So now the other thing I want to make you aware of is that we can take our fence and it can be tipped at any angle. Right now I have it set at 90 degrees because most of the time that's what we need, because we want to use it to true a piece of wood up and make it perfectly square and flat. And so that's how I have it set right now. But if I wanted to, I could tip this thing over and use it to chamfer corners. So that's a nice side benefit that we can use the joiner for. All right, now I want to describe to you the process that we're going to go through. Now, this wood is lumpy on pretty much all four sides. So what we're going to do first is we're going to use it to flatten one of the long surfaces. You can use a joiner as a planer, as we're going to do in this case, but the weakness is with the joiner is that you can only plane one side. If you plane the other side, there's no guarantee that both sides will be parallel. So that's what we use a planer for. But to get a wood ready to go into the table saw, it's okay for it as long as we've got it flat and true on this side. And then we want one side of the short sides to be true as well. When we put the wood against the fence and the table, it's going to make both of these surfaces to be exactly true and completely 90 degrees. And that's going to be perfect to go into the table saw with. Okay, now a couple of safety tips before we get started on actually cutting with the joiner. First of all, I made sure that my sleeves are rolled up and tightly tucked in. My shirt is tucked in, and I have my safety glasses, which I'm going to wear over the top of my regular glasses so I can see nice and clear. Now, as we get ready, there's also something that you need to have ready for you. Is you need to have some kind of way to push the wood through, especially when we're going to push it through flat. Now, with a joiner, you don't want to have a piece of wood that's any shorter than about 1.5 feet. This is about the minimum length that you want to use in a joiner. When we push through on the flat side, there's going to be more blades showing. So we like to use something like this. Now you can make a sled push stick, which I'm going to make at some point, but in the meantime I'm using a sanding block with a clamp on the back to give myself a little notch that will catch the wood and push it through. So when I push this through with this on top, it keeps my hands away from the blade at all times and keeps me safe. Okay, so that's how it's going to operate there. Now when we go through on the tall side, we don't need that device, and we can push it through with our hands like this. Let's use the joiner to make our wood true. Okay, now we've got this side planed down. Let's check it and see how it is now. I put it on the tabletop of the table saw because that's a flat surface, and now it doesn't rock at all. So now we've got this surface perfect. Now, let's tackle this one. Now, because you're noticing that it rocks back and forth, when I push it through the joiner, I want to keep all the pressure on one side. Notice that it didn't take much of a bite. It only took a bite out of this side because it is so bent. So we will continue cutting over here until the whole thing has been shaved. Now there's one important thing that I neglected to mention earlier, and that is you've got to be aware of the grain direction on your wood. Okay? Now with the grain direction, you want to feed with the grain facing this way. That way when it cuts, it doesn't tear the wood out, but it cuts with the grain. Now that looks fantastic. That looks a whole lot better than this, doesn't it? So now that I've got that taken care of, we notice that the wood does not rock anymore. Now I put my jointed side and my jointed face against the fence and the table saw, when I cut the other side, it will be perfectly straight and perfectly parallel to this true side that we just made. Now we have two surfaces ready for our table saw. Now, as a woodworker, you will notice that if you have straight and true wood, it's going to make all of your pieces turn out much, much better. If you don't have a joiner at this point, but you have a table saw, consider very seriously a joiner in your near future, because this is going to help your work considerably. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for dropping by the American Garage, and I hope that you learned a little bit more about how to use a joiner and the values that it can bring to your woodwork. Until next time, this is Steve from the American Garage.